Hey everyone, this is Dhruvin and welcome to the third season of Talk with Devs. This is the segment where we are inviting the industry experts from the globe and we are talking different things about Power Platform. So today's session is also one of the interesting one, and let me introduce our guest speaker for today's segment, Mr. Rahan Arif. Hey Rahan, how are you?
Hey, Dhruvin, I'm good. How's it going?
It's all good, and welcome to the season three of Talk with Devs. This is the first episode of this season, and I'm really glad to host you in the first episode of this season three. Thank you so much for your time being here.
Oh, my pleasure, and delighted to be debuting your and opening up your season three. How's the holidays and the new year for you? Busy times?
Yeah, so New Year was fantastic. I had my overseas travel last year, and just I'm eagerly waiting for 2023. And I can see from the beginning itself, last year, I've heard a news from you that Lowcodera is now available on App Stores. That's amazing news. And I'm really excited for today's session as well. So what's going on from last season to this season? Like many things has been changed, many new things you introduce. So in today's segment, what you are going to present to our audience?
No, absolutely. I think Lowcodera, thankfully, has been going from strength to strength. We hit some key milestones along the way last year, and we're anticipating another busy year. I think one of the key things for us last year was to start focusing not just on, I guess, individual components, but really showcasing the world what's achievable by way of real use cases. Because I think it's really important that people are able to see what is the true value of um, these components. And actually, they're only valuable if they're solving real business problems. And so that was a real shift we made with Lowcodera last year, making sure we could start anchoring and showcasing the value around real mainstream use cases which people are likely to be interested in. And I think today we're just going to be covering off one of those examples of how one of our components really opens up some of these use cases. So the component we're going to be focusing on today, if it's okay with you, is our Swimlane component. And as we'll illustrate, it really allows you to create some really exciting matrix experiences in your um, Power Apps. So if you're addressing use cases like doing a SWOT analysis, or if you're a project manager with lots of projects to manage and you need those projects prioritized, being able to produce an interactive matrix which helps you prioritize those projects in your portfolio is helpful. And we've got a few other examples of where uh, we can demonstrate the value of this particular component.
Mhm. Great, interesting. Streamline component. I have heard this for the very first time, and I'm really excited to look at this component and wanted to gain your expertise on that. So I'm really excited for that. And the audiences who are new to this particular season, if you haven't watched the first episode of the previous season, please do watch it out. The link is available in the description box. There you will get a clear picture what Lowcodera is, what it offers. So they are in a way that they are producing lots of PCF component which are very easy to use. It just come up with a package. You can just simply import it in your app and it's ready to use. So it will save lots of your development effort to building a really nice looking app. So if you want to build next generation Power Apps, I highly recommend to go with these components. And obviously check the link in the description box to know more about Lowcodera. So without further delay, before we start today's segment, let me just give a little bit introduction about Rahan. Rahan is founder of Lowcodera and CEO at Connected People. His mainly expertise in Microsoft Power Platform and M365 suite. And if you just want to make your organizational digitalization journey, feel free to connect him. The links are available obviously in the description box. So do check it out for more information and visit Rahan's LinkedIn account if you want to know more about Lowcodera and any transformation journey in M365 or Power Platform. So yeah, that's it. So Arhan, I'm really excited for today's session, and I would like to hand over the stage to you and go ahead and showcase how easy to configure this Swimlane component. What are the different use cases we can achieve it? So yeah, the stage is all yours.
Fantastic. Okay, let me see if I can bring up my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it.
Perfect, I can see it.
Great stuff. Now, one of the things we wanted to achieve, as I mentioned earlier on with Lowcodera, is we wanted to really allow folks to see the value of these components against real business use cases. And so what I'm going to be demonstrating over the next few minutes is how we have examples of our Swimlane component in action solving real enterprise use cases. And this is our test drive experience, which is available for anyone with a 365 account to subscribe into, and they can access all of these demos. There's about 30 plus demos in this experience at the moment, and we're adding more and more all of the time. And the ones I'm going to focus on today relate directly to this Swimlane component. And in this first set of demos, we'll focus on how the Swimlane component can help you as in a project management setting, if you're a program manager, project manager that wants to accomplish some particular activity. And the most, I guess, easy to understand example is the portfolio prioritization one. And so typically organizations are juggling with multiple projects. Unfortunately, not all of these projects can be done simultaneously. There's just too many projects floating about, and that means these projects need to be prioritized effectively. And this is a great use case for the Swimlane component, which you can see in front of you. And so what the Swimlane component allows you to do is to present information and your data in a really nice matrix. And in this case, we're following what is known as the Eisenhower matrix. And this classifies projects by whether they are urgent and important or the opposite, in which case these projects can be eliminated from your portfolio. So the idea is a bunch of stakeholders can come together and start making these decisions relating to prioritization of these projects. Each project is represented by a card. And the beauty of the Swimlane component is that we make this a highly interactive, fun experience for undertaking this activity. How do we do that? Well, we support things like dragging and dropping, which you can see here. You can see the cards are really nicely visually laid out with colors. And we also support the ability to have extended functionality against the projects, where maybe you can right click and start performing other actions against these projects, maybe adding new projects, highlighting an existing one, or perhaps linking through to other parts of your app to perform some other action. So in this case, it makes sense to link through to a project dashboard. The great thing about the Swimlane component, just like many other Lowcodera components, is that they support data from any data source which is available in your Power App, your Canvas app. So whether your underlying projects are held in Jira, SharePoint, even Project Online, as long as you can connect to that data source from your Power App, you can bring in that data into the Swimlane and work with it. One of the other interesting concepts we have, and it's quite pertinent to this example here, is Maybe you have a master project list elsewhere. And this is where this concept of this master column at the end comes into action. So maybe this is the bit where you initially import your project backlog into. And from there, you can begin your prioritization exercise by assigning it into one of these quadrants. So you can see here, I'm just dragging this project into the top left quadrant, which means it's urgent and it's important. And these are the projects which you want to be focusing on as a business. Whereas if you decide the project appears in bottom right, then these projects can be eliminated from your portfolio. So because this is a Power App, you can, do pretty much anything you want with regards to linking it to your other bits of information, performing advanced filtration options. So as I'm doing here, I'm just taking off a certain profile of projects, and all of that is perfectly possible. There's a lot of flexibility in this component to style and easily adjust the appearance, whether that's changing the background of the whole grid or maybe changing the styling of the actual card presentation. So in this instance, it now looks more like a sticky note. And what we're going to do is we're going to run through a few more examples of showing the swim lane in action, just like this one, and we'll hopefully get building one from scratch. So your viewers, Dhruvin, get to really understand how easy it is to get one of these up and running from the beginning. Okay, so that was the project prioritization example, and I'm just going to run through a few more examples. So staying with the project management use case, one of the other common things that a project manager often undertakes is this exercise of producing a RACI matrix. And this is essentially assigning classifications to certain tasks. So it's typically understanding who's going to be responsible for certain tasks, who needs to be consulted, and parts of the methodology really make this easy to understand what's going on. So typically you have your tasks laid down the left-hand side and your different people roles assigned on the top. And the idea is, again, we've really made this nice and easy with the dragging and dropping. And so what we're saying here, in this example, the project manager is now accountable for risk factors. And you can drag along existing cards or you can create new ones. So if we wanted to make the senior analyst responsible for the risk factors, we would right click in this quadrant here. And with one click, we've now got that senior analyst responsible for the risk factors. And with this particular methodology, there's actually two flavors of it. Some people prefer to do it like this, where they are got the tasks listed and then they're assigning them to who's responsible or who's accountable. Another way in which RACI matrices are done is where you have the classifications along the top, and then you are essentially have cards for the people, and you can drag the people into the respective slots. And just like before, with the right click, you can easily create some new content. So here you are, Dhruvin. Let's make you accountable for the economic model in this instance. Okay, so again, another interesting example of how our Swimlane component can be used to address a real use case for a project manager. So let's close that one down. The next example is a really simple one to understand. Every organization sets goals, and having a nice way of presenting and working to define those goals is helpful. So this one's not much of a matrix because actually it only has 2 columns. So this is probably our most basic example. But the reason why I like to bring this one up is you can see visually it's quite different. It looks more like a card-based tool. So you can just set the goals here. And of course, because this is ultimately a Power App, you get complete control to define what happens when, for example, a new card gets added, when it moves from one part of the matrix to another. So you can build a complete application experience with your business logic anchored around this whole component. And I guess the next example, which I'm about to showcase, illustrates how you can really streamline a whole business process quite nicely. So let's jump into that. And I'm actually going to go into our agile use case for this example. And we're going to talk about feature prioritization. So feature prioritization is the activity or the task of organizing your backlog into a priority that you can then move forward with to build your product, your software, whatever it is that you're trying to produce in an agile fashion. And often one of the most, I guess, I use the word cumbersome or activities which is done in all sorts of ways is to organize that backlog in an effective way where your stakeholders can take part. So typically you have your features listed maybe in an Excel spreadsheet, maybe in Azure DevOps, GitHub, maybe you've got some story estimation going on. But one of the most important inputs, or not just one, is being able to get some of those inputs from your wider stakeholders to understand how important some of these backlog items are. So again, a terrific use case for the Swimlane component is to be able to load in all of your features from your backlog, wherever that backlog is, as long as your Power App can read from it. And then you can begin that activity of prioritizing those features. So in this instance, we're trying to say if these backlog items are what the usage frequency is, what the amount of users is versus frequency. So if the feature ends up in the top right, we're saying it's used by all of the users all of the time. So that's, of course, something that's going to be very important. Whereas if it's in the bottom left, you're saying this feature is hardly used by anyone and it's not used much of the time at all. So actually, it shouldn't be that important. And actually, what you can do is define these different matrices with these different classifications. So now you're trying to score each feature on how aligned it is between your company goals and your user goals. And again, top right means there's a high degree of alignment. And finally, you have the possibility to score your features based on the level of effort versus the reward ratio. So in this instance, again, top right is the place you want to be because that means it's little to no effort to build and very high yield in terms of reward. And your stakeholders would come in and I guess interactively you could move these things around. And the beauty of this is that behind the scenes, as those moves are happening, you are automating your feature prioritization because of the scoring which is taking place. So as you're moving those things around in real time, you're generating some metrics which are calculating the priority overall across those different dimensions which we just scored. And so you now have a clear and very well structured method with some science behind it for prioritizing your backlog. So yeah, Dhruvin, hopefully those examples demonstrated in a real context some of what's possible with the swim lane.
Yes, absolutely, Rahan. Like these are really great use cases like goal management, agile methodology, RACI metrics, and
Yeah,
the special one that you have shown at the very last, which
yeah,
is fabulous and amazing. So
yeah,
we can see this. These are the different use cases where we can use this swimlane component. But
yes,
these use cases are complex. So how easy it is with the component to build. So let's say as a developer, I just
yeah,
want to build this. How much
yeah,
effort it will take and how easily I can build up this.
yeah. So with Lowcodera, I think one of our commitments is to take the pain away from building more complex experiences in Power Apps which address these use cases. That's what it is about. The headache is ours, and what you as an app maker or a citizen developer end up with is hopefully something that you can get going with very quickly. And what I'd like to do now is just demonstrate how quickly from scratch you can um, build out a SWOT analysis one, because I think this is something that people are familiar with. I didn't demonstrate this, but let's just quickly go into it. Um, so my job, I guess, right now, let's see if I can pull it off, is to very quickly, in the space of a few minutes, show you from scratch how you can construct one of these very quickly um, in a Power App, in a Canvas app. How does that sound, Dhruvin?
Yes, great.
Awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is um, I'm going to go into this blank Power App. And I know we've previously covered off how to get hold of Lowcodera, how to get it imported into your environment. So we're not going to be covering off any of that in this segment. So we're purely going to be focused on how to add the component and configure it from the very beginning. So
And one more thing, Rahan, I just want to
yes,
pause you here for a while.
sure.
Those who are very new and you don't know how to install the Lowcodera packages, we have a dedicated video created on that. So that link is also available in the description box as well as on the eye icon. You can see the same link. So just go through that. It's a very simple sign up process that you need to do before you get into this Lowcodera components. So just sign up over there. The process is step by step mentioned there. Once you are done with that process, it's available for you to use into this Power Apps. So these are the steps which you need to do as a part of your prerequisites. So just go through that video. Yeah, over to you, Rahan.
So we're going to be covering how to create this swim lane and in particular create a SWOT analysis matrix very quickly. And so the first thing you need to do is to add the swim lane component to your screen. And I've already covered off how to obviously import the components in. And so we've already got the swim lane board component available here to select as a code component. And we're just going to drop that onto the screen. And of course, it looks very vanilla. Let's just say that to begin with. And our job now is to start configuring this to look like a SWOT analysis. And with Lowcodera, what we do is obviously um, build components. That's what we do as a business. So our components are fully supported, fully documented. And so typically the best way of getting going with the component is heading over to our documentation area because we've got lots of snippets and walkthrough guides. And so that's docs.lowcodera.com. And over there, what you want to do is head over to our swim lane component and essentially to make the configuration as quick and as efficient as possible, the way you've got to think about the swim lane is it's going to help you create a matrix, and a matrix is nothing more than some rows and some columns. And so what we really need to do is basically tell the swim lane component how many rows and columns do you want? Okay, and that creates the foundations for what it looks like. And the first thing we want to do, we recommend, is that you create your columns. And so with a SWOT analysis, and that's the example which we've got documented here, we have two columns that we want to create. In this case, first column is called positive, and the second column is called negative in terms of its headers. And you can see we have two rows. So we're essentially trying to create a 2 by 2 matrix. And so the first thing we need to do is configure what we call the columns data set. And the data set is expecting just a few attributes for you to configure it with. And so essentially what we're going to do is just copy this Power Effects snippet and go back into the Power App. And from the Swimlane component, essentially there's a few data sets which we just need to configure. So the first one is the columns data set. And I'm just going to, for now, paste in this table, and without explaining anything, I'm just going to see we've now got two columns defined. Not really much happening at the moment, but I think when we add the rows, it will start rendering. Just a bit about this. So this is a JSON schema, and you can probably guess what some of this stuff is. It's kind of what the column is going to be called, setting a unique ID, and just setting some color properties for it. We'll come back to that in a moment because I think visually it'll make more sense once we've got the rows in there. So what we now need to do is come back, scroll down a bit, and we have some sample code for the rows data set. So this is the one that's going to define how many rows we want and what the rows are going to be called. So again, copy that snippet and come back. And this time we're going to, on the right hand side, make sure we're selecting the row property, and we're going to paste in our rows. And at this point, you will automatically see this coming together. And let's start here, right? So we've just defined a very simple 2 rows in this schema. And this schema doesn't expect too many properties to be defined. Okay, so we're just using a very simple Power Effects table formula to define 2 items. The first row we're calling internal, and the second row we're calling external. The color properties define what the text is going to look like inside of the labels that you see there on the end. So if we wanted this not to be called external, so we can call it, I don't know, outside, and we wanted the color to be red, you can change those, and you can see those are reflected. Now, this is looking a bit squashed to me. So we have a range of properties because, we tried to make this as easy to configure as possible. And so the row height at the moment is quite, it's set to 50. So if I bump that up to 300, you'll immediately see that the height of each row is now bigger than what it was earlier on. So you can obviously set a dynamic expression, and all of these properties, of course, support Power Effects. But for now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to set it to 350, and I think that looks a bit nicer. And just to follow on with the example, I'm going to reset the title back to external, and I'm going to set to white. And just in the interest of completeness, if we select the columns data set again, we can just explain what what these properties are. So again, title, if you want to change the headings along the top. Width unit's an interesting one, and this, I guess, dictates how many cards, when we've got the cards onto the swim lane, how many you can have in one column. So we've demonstrated earlier on how, in this case, we can support 3 cards within a given quadrant. And so that's what the width unit property sets. If this is 1, it means only 1 card can go into a given quadrant. The background relates to the background of the header, the color of the header, and the icon. And so we integrate with the Font Awesome library. So you can head over there to get over 2,000 references to icons, and you can get the codes for those. So if that needed to be something else, you can see that reflected on the headers as well. So what I'm going to do now, and yeah, just one more point here is, and this is specific to the columns. So to give you even more flexibility, you may have column headings, but you may also want to display some inner headings on each cell. And you can do that with this attribute called cells headers. And that gives you the opportunity to display an inner label within each cell. This is basically an object, and essentially it will go down and display these labels as you define them right there. So you can see in the first column, we've got strengths and opportunities. So that's strengths here and opportunities in these boxes. And then you also have in the second column, which is this one here, we've got the labels weakness and threats on the inside of the cells. And through this property called cells backgrounds, we're able to set the backgrounds of each individual cell here. So this is how we get the blue, green, orange, and amber respectively defined in the right places. Otherwise, you end up with the default colors, which is assigned to every single cell. So it does come with a default, but we're overriding that here. So very quickly, you're able to just basically say how many columns you want, what they're called, and how many rows do you want, what they're called, and what the color settings are respectively. So the next thing you need to do is get your data in here. And just in the interest of understanding this a bit better, what we're going to do for now is simply add some static items into the swim lane. So what I'm going to do, come back here, and as before, this time we're going to go to the actual work items data set itself. And just like before, we're just going to paste that snippet into here, and I'll come back to explaining it. But this is the data set which loads in your content or your items into the swim lane. And at this point, you've got a functional dragging and dropping component to look at on your screen. But we should talk about these properties. And again, there's nothing earth shattering here, although we offer a lot of flexibility. So that's why it's worth running through these. So the first one is a unique ID for the item. The second one is a title. So we're presenting some form of card, and these cards have various properties which we can define and configure, and that's what we're doing here through these attributes. So in this example here, we've got two items which are loaded onto the swim lane. And the first one here is called patented technology. So it has a title, a description, and perhaps the most important thing is, so these two next properties here define the position of where that item appears on the swim lane, because every item is basically an intersection of a column and a row. And this is why we need to say, okay, for this card, what is the column ID where it appears and what is the row ID? And I guess one thing which I didn't cover was, if we go back to our columns data set here, this is the reason why every column has an ID. So the column ID for this one is positive. The column ID for the second column is negative. And same story with rows. The ID of the first one is internal. The ID of the second one is external. And that means for each given item, we can reference where it should appear by simply saying what is the column ID and what is the row ID. And that essentially maps it back to the right place. This card type property, we have, as we showed in some of the demos, we had different styles of cards available to us. We have got a striped card, we've got a sticky note style card, we've even got an image type card, which we haven't got time to go into today. We've used that in our recent football app, which you may have seen, to create a nice little player profile. So all of these properties are configurable, but generally all you're doing is changing the styles and the colors at an individual item level. Of course, there's a number of properties that we have here which would influence pretty much the settings at a global level. We won't cover off too many of these today. All of them are documented on the documentation site down here, and they're quite straightforward to work with. One that I am going to just configure now is, I'm just going to turn off showing this master column for now, and that maximizes the width of the swim lane itself. So very quickly, we've defined rows and we've defined columns, and we've created two static items for our SWOT matrix in this case. And you might be wondering, okay, in reality, you're not really going to be typing in or having static work items. So how do you connect this to a real data source? So I think we'll finish maybe with that in the interest of time, just to showcase how you can quickly bind this to a dynamic data source. So it's very straightforward. All you have to do is, first of all, have a data source, of course. So here's one I made earlier. So in this case, it's a SharePoint list. And in the SharePoint list, there's nothing fancy going on. It's, this may be typical of what you might have. You have a title of something, you have a description, and we've added two columns here. And in reality, they may not be called this, but for learning, we've just got a column called column status and row status. So this is where all of your items are defined in SharePoint. And these two columns will ultimately dictate where the item appears on the swim lane once we connect to this data source. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my example. And the great thing about the snippet is that we can convert the power effects with a few changes to connect to that data source. So what I've done is, just in the interest of time, I've got my SWOT analysis SharePoint list added as a data source. And all we're going to do is add a for all command to pull all the items from that SharePoint list. So it's called SWOT analysis. So for all the items in the SWOT analysis, we no longer need this table expression. All we need is the schema as we've got it here, and close that. And now all we need to do, instead of these being static, so we've got 2 items, I'm going to expect 2 cards to go in here. What we need to do is convert this to pull the data from the SharePoint list now. So we can just simply say this record dot ID for this card. I believe we've got title, description, column status, and row status. Okay, so if we just replace this with this record dot title and this record dot description, this record, and this is the most interesting one. This will denote the placement. So we've got column status, so whether it's if we look at our grid, whether it's positive or negative, this item, and the row ID tells us if it's an internal or external item. So this record dot row status, and we can keep everything else exactly as it is, and we now have this coming from SharePoint. And just, I guess, to prove that, let's just and let's put that as something that's positive. Make sure I spell it correct, because these references need to tie up with the actual IDs. And we'll also add that as something that's internal. And if I go back, and of course, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've refreshed the data source, and you can see we now have a new card which is reading from that data source instantly. Dhruvin,
That's
has that
great.
made sense?
That's amazing. So it's very easy to configure. Like we just configure our
Yeah,
column, we configure our row, and we just
yeah,
provide our data source, and everything is to be done. That's
yeah,
amazing. I
yeah.
have a quick question here. Like, let's say
Sure.
now I'm moving the thing, like I'm moving this card from one quadrant to another quadrant. Does it
Yes.
mean that behind the scene it is automatically saving the databases as well?
No. So yeah, we could have built the component to do that. But it wouldn't make sense for us to do it in this way, because typically when you consider these use cases, people are making decisions, they're going backwards and forwards over things, and you wouldn't want to automatically commit those changes to your data source in real time. And so actually what we have is a mechanism that the app maker can tap into to facilitate what they would like to do when those things are moving around. And in simple terms, we have some output properties of the component, which allow you to track what's just moved and where it is at the moment, so that as an app maker, you can patch those changes back at the time that you want to. So if you wanted to build a save button to commit those
Mm-hmm.
changes to your data source, you could do that. So just very simply, the name of this component is Swimlane board 2, and you can see
Okay.
essentially these output properties. So let's just add a few of these, and you would use these to write your own power effects. And so I'll change this one to current column ID, and most importantly, dot So current work item ID. So that's the ID of the item, right? So if I just place these properties down here, as I move, you will see it knows I've just moved item with the ID 2,
Got it.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see these properties changing. So it's internal and it's moved to negative, and you can see these items essentially changing. So it's now in the positive. And
Mm-hmm.
what those 3 simple properties allow you to do is on the on change event of your Swimlane component is it allows you to put in some power effects here. If you
Okay,
wanted to
great.
do it on the change, if you wanted to write back, or you could have an external button.
Mm-hmm.
So you get
Okay,
complete
great.
flexibility to control how you want that to behave.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Like the power effect expression, whatever we want to do it, we can simply do it on change, or even we can just place save button outside, and we are getting all the values that are. We can just collect the properties that are being changed in collection and bulk save in the database. So it totally like the control is in our hand, so we can just
Yeah.
utilize this property to save the things. Okay, makes sense to
Yes.
me.
Yeah. Dhruvin, just a couple more things which you might want to make mention of is a lot of appearance customization properties on the right. So our card that you see in the swim lane has many properties it displays. You may not want to display all of those things, so you can toggle them off and have more compact cards which don't, sometimes you don't want to even show a description, so you want to make these narrower. You want to have more or less padding between the different sections of content. So you get to really customize the look of the card and adapt it to whatever makes sense for your particular um, use case. So there's lots of configuration
Yep.
which you can do, which is more just setting the properties
Yep.
on the right hand side.
Yep. So anyone who is watching this video, like just go through the property from the right panel. If you didn't understand any property, just go through the documentation. Everything is properly mentioned there, what to configure where, and you will get to know everything about it. So that's
Mm.
amazing. I have one more question, Rehan. Like
Sure.
let's say for an example, in the very beginning, we just hide the right-hand side section of this
Yes.
Swimlane component. I'm really
Yes.
excited to see what exactly it is, and if you can just
Yes.
showcase us, that would be
Yes.
great.
Great. Okay, so let's add it back in, right? And this is quite an important one because typically you might be importing your items in from some sort of backlog or some master system. And the reason why you're building these matrices is often to assign those items into some specific column or quadrant that you need to either prioritize or classify in some way. So I'm just going to talk about the master column very quickly. So this is, let's just rename that to backlog. And if you like, this is the place where you can put stuff, and maybe initially should get loaded into here. And where we have the row and column IDs, in this case defined as, the column's called positive here, the row ID is called internal here. This particular master column, the way we've done this is that the column ID and the row ID is basically set to -1. And so anything in -1 with a row ID of -1 and a column ID of -1 ends up in your master column. And therefore, you can initially decide to set all of your items when you import them in to -1, and that means they will appear here at the beginning. And it gives you a really nice way of bringing in new items which you haven't prioritized and focusing on those. Dhruvin, does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's really
Yes.
amazing because let's
Yeah.
say I have a list of 100 items, so it will be
Yes.
just appearing on the backlog, and then in a
Yes.
meeting we
Yes.
can just prioritize with the team and just take a
Ex
decision.
exactly that. Exactly that. So ultimately, all we would be changing and is 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 these statuses here would read as minus
Minus
one
one.
essentially. Exactly.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
yeah, the ID doesn't pair up with what we have within these boxes. So that's what the master column's there for. And yeah, you've understood that really well.
Mhm. That's great. One more question I have about this component is, let's say me as a project manager, I just arrange everything properly into appropriate quadrant. And now
Yes.
let's say I just want to use the native capability of PDF functions or
Yes.
print function that are available in the Power Apps. Does it support that as well? Like,
Yes. Yes. Now the print functionality is it's still in preview. As you know, it's not
right,
100%
correct,
perfect. However, we have had some half good, decent results with testing with this.
great.
Um, of course, there are some limitations where maybe there's too many items and they're going off of screen, or you maybe not be able to
Absolutely.
capture all of them. But generally, you should be okay.
Yeah, that's great because even with print function right now, the way Power App is working is if you have a lots of item you have scroll, then it doesn't print that. So that's
Mm,
totally fine. But at least we have a result that we can actually print the current screen because as a
yeah,
project manager, when I just prioritize, it's something like I just take a snapshot or maybe just take a print and just share it
yeah,
with my team. So it's very useful and very important use case.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, of course, if we had more time, what I would show you is how to implement the right click. Again, that is very straightforward.
Yep.
What I will just quickly demonstrate again, this is the benefit of the documentation. So we have another data set which defines your toolbar. And again, it's a very simple schema. And all you have to do is select the toolbar data set, paste it in. And consider this as you being able to define your customized context menu for what options you want to appear
Hmm.
um, on the right click. So we have, in this case, adding a work item, deleting a work item, and the ability to vote. And that's quite an interesting one if people want to, right click and vote on a particular card. And again, there's some configuration of how that context menu looks for each item. You can have an icon, but I've just literally pasted that in. And you can see now we have a context menu appearing.
Right.
And you might be thinking, okay, how do one of these events get triggered? Well, we have another output property which tells you what someone has just clicked on based on one of these options. So if you look at event type, okay, so you will see now someone has just clicked on add work item, someone just clicked on delete work item, someone just clicked on vote. So again, within your power effects on the on change command, you can now decide what you want to do, what should get triggered when someone initiates one of these events. So this is really powerful because you can define whatever context menu options that you want, whether it's send this item for approval, vote for it, um, navigate to somewhere else in your app. You have complete flexibility to make that context menu as powerful as you want.
Right, absolutely. And let's say even if I want to achieve, like I want to assign this thing to someone else, I can
Yes.
just
Yeah.
add that option in right click and open some
Yes.
fancy pop-up and just assign
Yes.
because
Yes.
ultimately the power is in our hand. Like we can write any power effects expression over here to achieve anything.
100%. And that's what we've built that in mind. We wanted to build something that was super easy to configure and change the look of the appearance, but also add a lot of depth to the functionality for people that want and flexibility that want to put in their power effects logic. So it can be as powerful as you want, really.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. And I really love this component, and I found lots of use cases for my current project as well. So yeah,
Great.
I request everyone to, just go through the documentation, try the component. You will fall in love with this component, the way it works, like how easy to drag and drop. And I'm just imagining like this is something that we are really doing in the Power Apps. And without writing a single line of code, it just plug and play component and our work is done. That's great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Rahan, for sharing this amazing component with us. And we definitely learn a lot from this component. And absolutely for Lowcodera, obviously you can visit their website. There are lots of component apart from this one. So these all are amazing. And if you guys think that we should create some more component videos moving forward in the upcoming video, then please hit thumbs up or maybe just provide your reaction in the comment section that how you think about this component. So we will come up with some more and more session related how to configure this component easily with your Power Apps. So yeah, that's it. Rahan, do you think you want to share anything else with our audience?
No, spot on. And if there's any questions or things you would like to see, feel free to connect with me, ask your questions. We're more than happy to engage with you.
That's great. Yeah, well said, Rahan. Like, for any question, feel free to add in the comment section, or you can directly connect Rahan on his LinkedIn account. His details are available in the description box. You can always check there. Also, even if you are planning to purchase the Lowcodera for your organization, we have a special discount offer. So, the discount code is available in the description box. You can go through and you can purchase, and maybe even if you want to see more demos or something, feel free to connect Lowcodera team. They will help you how to move forward and all. But yeah, this is really amazing, and this open up lots of insight to specifically develop very complex use cases for our applications, and really everything is in Power Apps. And the biggest advantage is that here you can connect any data sources. So that's great.
Yes, and just one more important point is that for all of our subscribers to Lowcodera, and you can get a free dev subscription, you actually
Yeah.
get access instantly to the samples. So we've got many samples of our swim lane, the demos I showed earlier. They're available for you to instantly download and import. So if you didn't want to spend 5 or 6 minutes configuring the properties, you can start with these templates right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much, Rahan, for your time and showing this wonderful demo with our audience. I think this is really amazing, and I'm pretty sure that audience will definitely sign up for the developer account and at least try this component. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being a part
Fantastic.
of this amazing session.
My pleasure. Pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. All right. So that's it for today's session. How do you think about today's session? Just feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe my channel and press the bell notification to never miss any updates from me. With this is Dhruvin signing off. See you in the next session with some amazing content. Till then, have a great day. Goodbye.